Welcome to this keynote session of the 2024 Cloud Exchange. My guests today are Ann Duncan, the Chief Information Officer at the Energy Department, Ches Sivagananan, the Chief Architect for the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, and David Larimore, the Chief Technology Officer for the Department of Homeland Security. Everyone, thank you so much for taking the time to join me.
Thank you. Of course.
Now, Ann, Ches, and David, you also are the chair people, that's one of those weird expressions, of the CIO Council's Innovation Committee, which is really what we're talking about. We'll be together for the next 45 minutes or so. And the reason why we brought you all together is really tags back to something that Federal CIO Claire Monterana said back in earlier this year at a event that I think your committee actually hosted or put on. And she really kind of challenged the federal community, agency leaders, industry alike, to think about this moment, and this moment that we're in from a technology perspective, from an IT modernization perspective, much differently. She encouraged the federal community to think across the ecosystem, to look at the big bets that the private sector, the agencies are making in technology. She said this is a generational opportunity. How can we harness and the energy, utilize capabilities across the government to think differently, maximize opportunities to be safe, responsible, creative, as the government and industry continues to create the next generation of technology. So with that, just a little bit of context being set, Ches, let me start with you. When we talk about these big questions, right, these big bets for the generation, what's that look like for you as an individual from a committee perspective? How are you helping to push that forward?
Yes, Jason, this is a defining moment. To set the context, I want to go back a little bit in history. So maybe this is a long history. There's a place called Blambo's Caves in South Africa. Not sure if you're all familiar with this. It's probably known as the oldest known human innovation lab. This is where about 30,000 years ago, humans invented fire. Okay, and that is a big tipping point in the human evolution. The reason for that is because we started eating cooked food, and that contributed to the growth of the human brain. And we start to become smarter, and that contributed like where we've been a hunter before, and then we started like settling in one place. We started farmland, domestication, and agriculture becomes eventually part of our life, right? But it's a great tipping point, and it's a great way why we are here. But it also had for every action there's an equal and opposite reaction, right? But it's also the start of the deforestation and greenhouse emission, right? So now wish we had some guardrails there at that point. We never thought about it. Probably we're not smarter. And then there's again, like not that far in the history, the early 1700s when James Watt invented steam engine. We were like excited, and that's the start of the Industrial Revolution. And eventually, we went into the intelligent automation with computers in the 20th century, right? But again, that also had like a equal and opposite reaction, because it was also the start of the carbon emission, which kind of contributes to the climate change challenges we are facing today. So again, we were not smarter. Wish we would have gone back and put some guardrails. But now look back, like where we are. Computers, intelligent automation, we started digitizing data. Today, we are living in the world of digital data, which means anything we speak, anything we talk, anything we move, the advancement of sensors, it becomes a data today. And then we have distributed technologies to harness and connect data across various fields. And now with the high performance computers, we can start, and the neural networks, we can start predicting stuff with this data, right? So the data is the new oil. And guess what? The federal government has got some unique data that nobody else in the world has. And we want to make sure the data, whatever we're using is safeguarded for the wellness and safety of the American citizens. So this is where, where the data-driven innovations are like kind of getting accelerated, but we don't want to do the same mistakes what we did in the history, right? We want to make sure that as this innovation evolves, we want to make sure we have some good guardrails and do it in the right way, right? And that's where this group is mostly focused on, and this is why this is like an important moment to Claire's point, and a lot of emphasis on data-driven innovation and making sure, the data strategy. It started with the data strategy, the AI, memo, the customer experience, everything is kind of centered around this. So yeah, it is a defining moment, and we have our roles and responsibilities to play on this.
So I think I want to also thank everybody for being here. It's great to see you guys in person, even though we're going to be on video. But I want to add some thoughts to that, and then I'll pass to David, because I was looking at you and didn't know he wanted to say something. So I think that from a science standpoint, because energy, I mean, it's funny, departments' names are misleading, right? Department of Energy is fundamentally a science agency. That's like, we do a lot of stuff with energy, but we do tons of science. And all science has become computational. And so if we look right now, we've got AI and quantum coming at us. AI is here, quantum's coming. Name your next thing that's coming, probably some good instantiations of AR and VR, and those things being able to help us move science forward, because our limitations are the models we build of the physical systems we're trying to create. And to be able to advance clean energy by finding better battery materials, by finding better substrates for solar panels, by finding better ways to create fission reactions, because our modeling drives those reactions. All those things are hugely important, and they provide a foundation for where we're going in the future for the whole government. That science is going to be, our whole economy and our whole government is going to be based on that science advancement. So it is really an opportunity for us as a government to look at how we can do it all better from an innovation standpoint, and how we can all work together, right? Which reflects some of the work we're doing right now in terms of figuring out where is everybody in the government going, and how can we sort of go there together.
Right, and I just wanted to mention the nexus of all of this to the Federal CIO Council and our Innovation Committee. And I've been a part of the committee for a little over a year now. It's just been incredible to me to see the evolution of the thought coming to the table. The committee members really coming in, sort of committing to sort of how are we part of that bigger picture, which has been really unique in my career. Having that CTO title, which we don't necessarily have that same group of ownership and legislation and statute as CIO and CISO and Chief Data Officer. Yep. So being able to have a community and a place where these sort of like common roles can come together to bring innovation, for me, has been the first time in my over 10-year career in the federal government. So super exciting.
Ches, I was not expecting you to start with a land before time fire discussion, but
I thought some stories would be interesting.
But I think that's it's a great kind of set of understanding that we did this, we had this reaction. So okay, so now we're smarter. We know that there's a reaction that could be coming. Innovation came up from all three of you in a different way. Let me ask David to jump in here. And as we talk about innovation, that's a word that gets thrown a lot around in government. Oh, I got to be more innovative. We have to be more innovative. And then, okay, but that's harder. So from your committee standpoint, how are you defining it? How are you kind of looking at identifying what is an innovative process, technology, practice? Let's get some basic definitions maybe going first.
Right, so the way we tend to operate is understanding that things that are innovative today will be legacy tomorrow. So the mark of innovation for us is really about the ability to continuously modernize. So our ability to look at sort of big problems and solve them in ways to where we continuously are able to innovate is ultimately the measure of success we're looking at today. It's something that cloud, Agile, SecDevOps all give us access to. And so when you start applying commercial AI to those three foundational sort of tenets of modernization, you now have that opportunity to start achieving that goal.
To add on what David was talking about, to me, innovation, I know people sometimes, when innovation comes in, people easily relate it to emerging technologies, but it's not, it doesn't have to be emerging tech. It's all about new ideas, right? To me, the innovation is taking, first harvesting great ideas from people, right? And take that idea, experiment it, and then find a way to scale and make sure it's adapted at an enterprise scale. It's really an ecosystem, and it has to be people-centric, right? And then when it comes to these ideas, usually there are like two types of things that I have seen, or we have seen. The first one being like operational innovation. Like when you do stuff repeatedly with the agile mindset, you try to improve that with some new contributions into that. That happens all the time. But there's also another type of innovation, which is you radically think different how to do that job, completely different. And that's where we run into challenges all the time when we think about such innovations. So to me, like innovation is all about operationalizing new ideas. It doesn't matter we use emerging tech, not you use technology. It could be a simple process change. It could be a people thing. It could be a data thing. It could be anything, but it's just making our lives better with this idea. That's about innovation.
Yeah, I'll add that there's so many great ideas in the government, right? It's not a matter of figuring out what we want to be innovative about. It's about freeing all those ideas, letting people have the opportunities to work on the things they want to work on, and getting all the bureaucracy out of their ways so they can do really cool stuff.
David, let me go back to something you said, because we are at Cloud Exchange, so we got to talk a little cloud in here, right?
Right.
But this idea versus fire. But this idea of cloud, agile, SecDevOps, that's opened the door to that innovation. And I'll throw it to anyone who wants to jump in, but since, David, you said it, I'll start with you. How has the last 3, 5, 7 years, with becoming more comfortable with cloud, adopting an agile framework, adapting this idea that we can iterate software, it doesn't have to big bang, how has that kind of created that spur of innovation that you all are seeing? Again, you can relate it to broad or even something at DHS.
Over the last 5 to 7 years, it's very easy for me to talk about cloud first and cloud smart and a lot of the sort of government-wide efforts. I think talking about what agencies, departments, organizations have learned is that when you start with the cloud for a software system or whatever the capability is, you are ultimately reducing the barrier to entry for predominantly everything else you need to work on, right? Whether it's networking, whether it's compute, whether it's storage, whether it is traditional platform or software as a service, you are drastically reducing the level of complexity from a cybersecurity perspective, from a physical security perspective, from a software development perspective. You're reducing the amount of code you have to write, you're reducing the amount of code that you have to review, right? And ultimately, all of those things combined allow us to deliver solutions for our customers faster, right? And so, the underpinning here is that a good, solid foundation of cloud in any department, any agency, where cloud is a acceptable solution, right? So there's a lot of whether it's disaster management, cybersecurity, network security, and they're working on enabling those types of technologies to be commercially available. But for a vast amount of the federal government, the access to cloud services drastically increases our ability to deliver for our customers.
And just it's very similar, because build on that is something you said was obviously great ideas, just free them from the bureaucracy. Great tagline, I think we could have t-shirts, right? Yeah. But in many ways, remove the obstacles, and what David is saying, that good foundation removes a lot of those obstacles. When you all, from an innovation committee perspective, what are the obstacles you are seeing? How do you remove them? Walk me through kind of like, hey, if someone brings a problem to the CIO council and Claire goes, oh, that's Ches and David and Ann, you take that, right? Like, walk me through the kind of the process to how you freeing from the bureaucracy.
Yeah, that's a super question. I want to pull the thread a little bit on what David said for just a second, and then I will answer that. And that is, you take that a step further, right? We enable ourselves to move fast, but we also enable the users in our communities to move fast. So when we look at, and I'll admit our labs are ahead of us on this, but you can go into a lab now and you get a birthright, right? You get computing hours, you get AI hours, you get all sorts of tools that all you have to do is log on and they're there and ready for you to use. And there are places within departments and agencies where you see this as well. But that ability to just say, yep, here's a place where you can do your work, where you can try something, where you can play around and build a product or a tool for yourself without having to go get a bunch of stuff provisioned is super helpful. So in terms of the Innovation Committee, how we solve those problems. So it's ultimately we're not, the innovation committee is a very small amount of resources. Right? We don't, as a committee, we can do things like build a roadmap, identify a problem, hold a symposium. We then have to go back to the departments and agencies if we really want to deliver some outcome. So often we will pull something into that committee and look at it and go, oh, actually here's a TMF project that could be sponsored by NSF or by FDIC or by DOE or whoever that might be. And maybe we can get this project off the ground using one of the departments or agencies. But we try and bring people together. We try and create the conditions that allow people to be successful by pulling together all those resources, putting our brain power in it. And then ultimately, though, it ends up a department or agency, if we want to do something of substance, is going to have to jump in there and get involved.
So I want to add on top of what Anne mentioned, the committee itself is like kind of having great brains in there. Most of them are voluntary people who come in and spend their hours helping us. But when it came to obstacle, the observation that we generally see is resistance to change, right? And not willing to take that risk. And this is where, like, the operational innovations, when I was talking about operational, radically doing something different, the operational innovation side is generally okay because people are trying and they try to get better at it, David.
Oh, yeah.
So to your point. But then the radically different or disruptive type of innovation is where we see a lot of resistance to change and not willing to take the risk-averse mindset, right? So this is where we had to, as a committee, we have to work really hard pulling people together, and we have to take a people-centric approach. Sometimes what we do is we look for, like to Anne's point about, identifying early adopters, pairing with people, identifying partnerships. To your point again, cloud is just not about the service providers. It's also shared services. It's also about somebody else who has done something similar, even in the industry, even in the commercial side. How do you connect? How do you bridge that partnership? And that's where we spend a lot of our time in overcoming this challenge and identifying those early adopters and developing change champions and creating that network. That's primarily our focus at this point.
Yeah, we tend to hear a lot like, but have you done it in this cloud?
Right.
Have you done it?
Right.
We're in this cloud. That's great. You did it in that cloud.
Yeah.
And so, like, we have a lot of people like, yes. And as a matter of fact, we have done it in that cloud. And it becomes a more organic conversation, and it becomes a real nexus point for solving problems. And we found that to be incredibly valuable and something that we may not have spent enough time in the beginning, but are realizing that's becoming one of the most like shining star attributes of the Innovation Committee.
One of the things when we talk about the playbooks and the kind of bringing people together, right? And, there was no thought that the committee, there's 3 of you who have full-time jobs, so really you're just trying to, more than full-time jobs, you're trying to get kind of people moving in the right direction. Let's talk a little bit about some of the ways you all are looking at 2024 beyond. We're halfway through the year, some priorities, some big things that you kind of would like to kind of push out and get people related, focused on from the Innovation Committee. Ches, do you want to jump in here?
Sure. Let me start with another good artifact here. What happens, Jason, is like if you imagine you create a graph where you put all the great ideas coming in, and then on the left side, and then you put on the right-hand side, you try to see how many of those ideas are really getting operationalized, and then you just add a factor of time on the x-axis. You will see some of these ideas are kind of going down, in a valley, and then at some point they die, and only very few pick up from there and eventually gets operationalized, right? And we call that point as valley of death. And this is where great ideas dies because of lack of resources, lack of skill sets, lack of partnerships, timeliness, lack of political support, and you can keep going on and on. And this is where we come in as an innovation committee. We bring that network, us with other CXO community, the agencies, small agency groups, industry. We try to bring that graph, the valley of death, little above, to provide that support to take more of these ideas, eventually making them operationalized, right? And that's our focus. Now, given that, what we do, we try this in various different angles. We try to create communities. We try to spur the community with great thinking. Sometimes you have seen we doing symposiums. Sometimes, like what Anne was talking about, we build artifacts like roadmaps or like journey maps about these emerging technologies or data-driven innovations or cybersecurity or the customer experience. So this is really our focus. So we kind of have a general objective and direction where we are headed, but most of these are like timeliness. When there's a priority that hits us, okay, we want to bridge these people, and there are great things happening one side where the other side needs help. We put together some artifacts and then drive that journey, right? So that's where we are. In 24, our focus is primarily on data-driven innovations, I would say, customer experience, and we are also helping our groups on some of the cybersecurity innovation stuff. So the journey continues in many different angles. There is not like a set stage on our roadmap, but it's just like, what is immediate need, we just focus on that. Right.
I'll just add that we're really trying to find opportunities to create tangible outcomes and not just talk. Even when we do the symposiums, our goal has been to have follow-up happen from the symposiums. So, for example, we did that fraud symposium, and then the CFO Council took that and ran with it and did the next activity around that. And that's our goal, is really to say, whatever we're doing, that it's sticky, that it gets some outcomes and results, and not just, oh, we had a nice chat today.
The outcome piece, what does that sometimes look like, and how do you go from, okay, here's a playbook, here's a roadmap, how does it get implemented? Because, and as CIO at DOE, you could, I worked on this, I love it, we're going to do it, right? Mm-hmm. And David at DHS and Ches at FDIC, but it's that, how do you kind of spread it to other colleagues? And you go to XYZ agency and to the CIO and be like, this is really good, you'll love it. And they go, great, and one more thing for them to do, right? Yeah. So what do you do? Like, how do you kind of create that community and create the momentum?
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough one. If you look at, the work that we did at DOE with the Scaling Digital Transformation Playbook, we adopt that inside DOE. We talked about a lot. We're still talking about when we can. We gave it out to a bunch of people. We're hoping that people are going to use it. But hope is not a strategy. So we continue to try and evangelize that particular thing. So there are certain deliverables where it's a, hey, look at this really cool thing we did. We hope you'll use it. And again, they may or may not, because everybody's busy. There's some things we're working on now that are very much, and I mentioned TMF, right? We're very much looking at, hey, here's a plan, and this plan results in us actually putting a proposal into TMF to get money to do a project, which is going to land somewhere. I don't know that we know yet where that project might land, although I have some thoughts about it. And so that's a real tangible thing where we can say we actually managed to move that forward and make sure that something happened. So it is a challenge when a lot of work products can easily become shelfware. We all know that. And so trying to avoid everybody putting their energy into some sort of user guide or this guide or that guide, and then everyone go, that's nice.
I've got to ask about the TMF project, and I know you're not going to be able to tell me much yet, but you'll give me a little bit of 50,000, 100,000 foot view. It's in something innovative.
We're looking at something in the AI space. How about I can tell you that. I think that's a fair thing. If someone feels safe expanding a little further, they can feel free. So.
David probably does, right? All right. I tried.
Yeah, you tried. You got to get your news if you can.
If you give me a little bit of a rope, I will hang myself. No. But let me ask about, since Anne brought up the playbook that you all put together, the roadmap you put together at DOE, let me ask you both for maybe one or two innovative things that's happening at DHS, at FDIC, that you'd like to maybe expand upon, or at least get folks out there to say, hey, if David's doing that or if Ches is doing that, I should call them up and do that too, or beg, borrow, and steal from them. Anything, what comes to mind?
So just rattling off to the top of the list. First and foremost, Department of Homeland Security identified a real gap around knowledge, skills, and abilities around AI in the federal workspace. So we've instituted a one-of-a-kind DHS AI Corps to bring in 50 AI experts. We already have, I think, 7 on board as of today. We're going to have close to 15 by the end of this fiscal year. We're already starting to gear them up to deploy projects that are supporting executive order updates and other sort of administration priorities in the department. It's just been incredibly exciting. Over 5,500 resumes that we've reviewed, several hundred interviews that we've had. It is incredible to see the caliber. Never in my career have I seen the caliber of individuals coming from the private sector, raising their hand and really saying that I want to support a mission, right? People going from, supporting recommendation engines to now like looking at countering the illicit trade of fentanyl, right? It's just incredible there. The second side of things comes to generative AI, right? So the Secretary of Homeland Security made a commitment in April of last year through the creation of the AI task force to support some core areas around the department. Foremost, the safe, transparent, and responsible adoption of AI, and that includes generative AI. So we realize the phenomenal potential, but also a lot of the concerns around generative AI. So we spent several months not only putting together a first of its kind policy around the use of commercial generative AI tools, we developed training, we developed agreements with several companies to actually have government-friendly terms of service, supervisor guidebooks, et cetera, and we have gone through the gamut and made this publicly accessible. So we have had several conversations at the state and federal level. It is on dhs.gov/AI, and any federal agency department can use this, control copy, control paste. A lot of the companies that we built these agreements with have told us, like, please share this as much as possible. We want to be able to accommodate other potential customers, et cetera. I mean, we get protections around privacy that we don't get out the door. We get protections around indemnification that we don't get out the door with a lot of these companies. And it solves a real sort of big gap that we've had in the cloud space that the department is really starting to realize is a huge benefit for more than just DHS.
That's an exciting story at DHS, but just wanted to connect back with Dave and Ann. When we put these artifacts at the like you call roadmaps, sometimes we call Journey Max or marketplace, whatever they are, we see generally, not one size fits everybody, right? And that's a big observation from the committee perspective. And somebody, on the maturity scale, they're happy with just crawling. Somebody wants to fly, right? And this is the stuff when we put together and we see those gaps, and then we kind of connect with people and make sure, from the FDIC perspective, our biggest challenge is the data sharing across the financial regulatory space, right? Where we want to build an infrastructure that we can freely share some of this data for our examinations. So these are some of the stuff where eventually turns into an interagency effort, and then we advocate for that, to go back to the TMF and those kind of things.
Both great examples. I think the information sharing piece, because as you mentioned, Chaz, at the beginning, this is one of the main goals is really data-driven sharing, data-driven decision-making. Does that open the door to a whole host of challenges where, to David's point of AI can come in and create more challenges and more opportunities? How are you all kind of looking at, okay, how do we put, because you mentioned guardrails, right, and understanding, how do you find that balance of, okay, we want to make this information accessible, but how do we protect it at the same time? Does that come to you as from an innovation perspective? I know it all comes to you as your day jobs, but let maybe talk about it from the broader perspective of how do you strike the balance and how do you share that balance?
Yeah, to me, the journey is, when you pick up an idea, probably mentioned this before, the roadblocks are really adoption, and change management, right? So what we do is we take a people-centric approach. In this, usually, that's what we do most cases. When we go and tell, hey, this technology is going to solve the problem, it's very disruptive. Just go back. That's what our friend Copernicus did in 15th century. He said, Earth is going around the sun. He got thrown into jail or fire, right? So we don't want to be in this situation. So we usually take a passive approach during the early stage, and then we just connect with the right people, and then we balance it out, because when we experiment it, we learn something new, right? And that eventually turns into the guardrail, inputs to the guardrails, where we have to have the data governance is a great example. Because once we came up with the data strategy, we realized we needed governance around this thing, right? So that's really the balance. So it's really a journey. When you start ideating, and experimenting, some of these inputs, the feedbacks that you generate from these actions are critical for some of those decisions, and that's how you balance your journey through this path.
People side from as the committee looks at, okay, what do we focus on? What's important to the federal community? How do you take that side in? Where do you get your ideas from? And then how do you take those ideas and say, hey, let's work on this? So I'll use in the beginning, I quoted federal CIO Claremont Toronto. This was at an AI quantum event that you all sponsored. Why did you decide to go there versus the 100 other ways you could have went? Is there something that kind of, again, the people side, is that what's driving it? Or is it an industry kind of side, meaning not that they're going to sponsor it per se, but there's a lot of industry excitement over AI. Right. What kind of drives kind of some of your areas you focus on?
So I think that we choose the items based on a couple things, right? Number one is what's going to be most valuable for the government as a whole. So what can the Innovation Committee do that's going to bring the most value to our colleagues, to the government, to the citizens who pay for all this, the taxpayers. So the second thing is what is the committee going to get excited about doing, right? We can come up with this great agenda of things that are going to be great taxpayer value, but ultimately this is a volunteer activity. People do this because they want to do it, and so we have to create things that people are going to get excited about doing. So I would argue those are the two fundamental drivers. What's going to add value? What do people want to do? And then, oh, by the way, there's what does Claire want? Because she is ultimately the boss of the Innovation Committee. So there's a filter there too. So if you in terms of how we make sausage, we come up with some stuff, and then we go, hey, Claire, this is what we're thinking about. And Claire says, I like it, I don't like it, tweak this, do that, go.
The Innovation Committee represents an intersection of a lot of different areas, where you have the CIO Council, the CDO Council, the CAIO Council, right? Many of them are focusing on their specific swim lanes around, you've got FTARA, you got the Data Act, you got our new, 14110 on AI, right? So there's a heavy emphasis on the implementation of that. But there's so many things that relate to providing value to our customers, to advancing the agency, innovation, as Chaz said. And so we're the connective tissue between those groups, right? We have representatives from a far-reaching background in various departments and agencies that include cyber equities, that include data, that include sort of IT operations, et cetera. So really our group is designed around the intersection of those various committees and helping to drive efforts that make sense to have a combination approach.
Yeah. Super point.
Are there ever discussions, well, that's not really innovative. Why are you guys doing this? How often does it come up? Really, that's been done for years, right? Like the cloud, a lot of people argue the cloud's not even innovative. It was called ASPs back in the 90s, right? Alternative service providers, which I always enjoyed when our friend Mark Foreman would bring this up back in the early 2000s. But how does that work through it?
So, well, I know that
don't throw anyone under the bus.
No, your comment makes me think
data
about
officers.
The term robotic process automation,
Right,
and we were doing like screen scrapers, back files back in BASIC back in the day. So we're not the first to do a lot of things. Like, let's be honest here. So we tend to look at a bell curve of you've got 10% of the federal government, and that's a negotiable number there. That is forward-leaning, and they've been doing AI for years. If you look at the AI use case inventory, you see like a clear departments, agencies have been spending over a decade really investing into the technologies and experimenting with the technologies. And then you also see the bottom 10% and those that are struggling, right? There are certain departments that have a huge amount of responsibility in the regulation space, and it's hard for them to make changes. And it could be related to funding, it could be related to a number of factors. And then you have the other 80%, and those are just agencies that just need a little bit of help, and it's not always funding. They need the ideas to help push them in the biggest place available. And that's where we really see the value there. And no, we're not inventing like frontier AI models in the innovation committees, but we are looking at like what are those big commercial technologies, what are those cloud vendors, what are those ideas that are starting to come out of these forward-leading agencies, and how do we empower the other 80% of agencies to start taking advantage of those lessons learned?
Yeah. I mean, to your point, Dave, innovation is in the eye of the beholder, right? Yeah. There are things that we're trying to do that our labs would be like, yeah, did that 10 years ago. But for the rest of us in government, we are not. My labs might be on what one of my colleagues used to call the beheading edge of technology, right? Where they should be, frankly. The rest of us are in that middle, and we need to help the folks in the middle.
I imagine there's a lean in, lean out, meaning in some areas you're better, in some areas you're not as innovative. The government does get a bad rap, if you will, of being slow, of not being as innovative. And I always prefer to point out all the innovative things that have come. And I was doing research for a different panel, and you look at something as simple as VA implementing, developing the nicotine patch, right? Smoking was a big deal in the, 100 years, for the last 100 years. Now all of a sudden they figured a way to get people off smoking, and it was because of VA. Is that frustrated? Is that a frustrating piece for you all when people are like, oh, government's not innovative? Being a part of the innovation committee, it kind of, talk a little bit about how do you all push back too? How do you push back?
I wouldn't say I'm really upset or something like that. No, definitely not, because when it comes to government, we have a different responsibility. Our mission is to serve the taxpayers and the citizens of the United States. Being innovative in the government doesn't mean that we have to do things differently, but we have to be very careful about adverse reaction that we talked about at the beginning of this panel, right? So that is where we spend a lot of our time making sure there are like good policies around the risk factors analyzed, making sure we are involving the right people. It's about, end of the day, whatever that innovations are about, the well-being and safetiness of the people that is impacted, right? So I think that's why I would say things are slow in the government, but end of the day, it has a good outcome, right? But this is where some of the early adopters, the journey that we talked about is going to be very critical in pushing those limits. But generally speaking, yes, government is slow, but there's a reason for that.
Yeah, I object when people say government doesn't work, because it does. And we know countries where government doesn't work. Our government works. And it is designed, to your point, it's designed to be slow, it's designed to be deliberative. It is slower than it should be in a lot of cases because we've put so many guardrails in to avoid making mistakes, to avoid fraud, waste, and abuse, that we slow the process down to a ridiculous level. Sometimes we also make it far more expensive than it needs to be because of those things. But flip over to my labs, right? That's where we allow government to go super fast, right? We give them money. We have clear rules, clear guardrails. We tell them how to spend the money. We tell them how we're going to measure them, and then we let them go. And so they're able to go a lot faster than we are. And so we have ways in the government to go faster. And yes, I think we continue to find ways to go faster. I mean, simple things like the cloud, like DevSecOps, like low code, no code, right? Those are all things that help us go faster. And if you remember a decade ago, you and I talking with Greg Godbout, right? And we were talking about how do we go faster, and it's finding ways to put contracts in place, finding ways to hire quicker. We can do things that make things go faster. Would I have thought a decade ago that we would still be trying to figure out how to do those contracts, how to do the hiring? Probably not. But we can get there, but there is a middle ground, right? I don't want DOE headquarters to go as fast as DOE labs. I'd like it to go faster than it does.
Yeah, I tend to want to remind folks, at least for the Department of Homeland Security. I mean, we've got 250,000 federal employees. We have $10 billion of IT spend, and I don't think people really see the forest, the trees of just the incredible work done every single day where we are actually in the field helping to build technology with the operators and getting live feedback. There's been a huge impetus recently around sort of the customer experience effort and being involved in that and being part of that. The department has done nothing but really prove to me more how hard we are working with our industry partners and our customers to help deliver technologies.
And I'll just jump in and say, if you look at pre-check and global entry and the renewal process for global entry and the experience at immigration. I mean, I came into Dulles the other day, walked up to a screen, took my picture, sent me to an immigration official. In 30 seconds, I was out the door.
Yeah.
I mean, DHS has done some amazing things with technology.
I'll second that. I just did my trusted traveler for the first time, and I couldn't.
Super easy.
It took me longer to get down to the Reagan building in D.C. than it did to go through the process, which means something was working.
Yeah.
Right.
We have just a few minutes left, so I think we started with Chad, so maybe I'll start on this side of the table. I'll start with David on this one, and there's a couple things that again kind of leads into the discussion on innovation, and folks say, well, the government isn't innovative. David, let me ask you to start with, and we'll go through, when you talk to your fellow federal executives and you say to them, hey, I'm on the innovation committee, and they either snicker or they kind of look sideways at you like, what's innovation, right? There's no innovation in government. What's the, and then we'll ask the same question about industry too, because they're the other ones who will snicker and look sideways sometimes, is, what do you want them to know about not just the committee, but what's happening more broadly in government, DHS, or just broadly around innovation?
I don't think I'll be able to stop laughing about the snickering comment. That is funny. So the biggest point to share is around the acknowledgement of how hard it is to do things right. We are expected to do things right the first time, without error, without fail. And so the biggest thing I will say is the best way to prevent error is to ask questions and learn and have a culture of learning.
Yep.
So that has been like a huge center point around sort of the reason why the Innovation Council exists, is to bring around that culture of learning and culture of sharing. So I'm going to tell folks to commit, buy in, lean in. Like, you don't have to have a CIO sitting on the innovation committee. Like, send folks really interested in innovation and learning about technologies that their department or agency hasn't had access to yet or has questions about. Like, we still get questions about cloud. Like, we still get questions about cloud. Like, well, how did you guys do this? Or we're just learning about it. Like, come here, learn, talk, be part of the community. I guarantee you, your department agency will be better off.
And I was going to go to Ann, but I have to just jump in. Do you all have sessions, or do you have like ask me anythings or anything like that for innovation committee? Even if it's just internally to the CIO, government only, because all the industry would be excited to do that too. Like, when's your next procurement coming out? But do you have something where you have office hours for government?
So
you're already busy. I mean, I know I'm asking to put more on your plate.
That is an excellent idea. But no, we do generally allow during the committee meetings an opportunity for individuals, members, those are new, to be able to provide feedback, comments, ask questions, et cetera.
I'd be happy to host any Ask Me Anythings with you.
I was going to say, I think you just found our next Innovation Committee event. It's a live online Ask Me Anything.
That's right.
Yeah. So back to, find my way back to the original question here.
Snickering.
Yeah, snickering. So, I think it's interesting, and you talked about you were going to follow up with industry, and I'm just going to jump in there. We don't have a lot of time. So, when I first came to government, in a school district, which probably did not help this situation. But my experience when I first came to government was industry was kind of like, oh, honey, let us tell you how to do this. They don't do that anymore. Industry, I think, has figured out that most of government actually understands what they're doing. And maybe they just don't talk to me like that anymore. But I certainly sense that industry, when they come into our office, they know they have to have their A game on. They know that we are going to ask them smart questions. And I would say that's certainly true of the folks that I talk to, which are mostly the bigger companies. I don't end up talking to a lot of the small startups, which my team does, because I generally talk to people we're doing business with as opposed to people who want to do business with us. But I've definitely seen a change in that behavior. Unfortunately, I think the public has kind of gone the other way. And so we've got work to do to continue to help the public understand the government really does work. The government does a lot for them. For every time they get frustrated by the government, and I was currently being frustrated by one of the other agencies, not one represented here at the table, but one of the other agencies. The government's personally driving me crazy right now. But for every time that happens, we do many, many things that work, and there are innovations. We just talked about DHS's innovation. There's a lot of good stuff going on.
Do you, before Ches jumps in, do you feel like industry is trying to be innovative with you? Because a lot of times industry will complain, well, we're just answering the RFP, or the government, if we bring the government something innovative, they're like, oh, it's not in the RFP, then we, like, do you get a sense that there's...
Yeah, the procurement process is still hard, right? And so to the extent possible, we need to find ways to work with government before the RFP, work with industry before the RFP goes out to know the art of the possible, right? What is it that they can bring that we can allow room in the RFP for? Procurement is still incredibly rigid. We've been trying to crack that nut for a long time to make it easier for us to get good ideas into government. And so I would suspect that yes, they still are out there saying, we're just answering the RFP because we're not going to get the business if we don't just answer the RFP, and we are still missing opportunities that way. And for me, I have the out, which is I got my labs, and they can go try that stuff and then bring it in. But for the rest of the government, we don't have that, and we are still missing opportunities for sure.
And Ches, I'll give you the last word.
Sure. First, I thought this was our AMA, no?
I've asked you anything I wanted to. Questions will everyone else get to ask you questions.
All right. No, thank you. I thought I would just crack a joke before we start, but anyway. So, Jason, to answer the question, to my fellow government colleagues, it's easy to ideate. Sometimes it may be little tougher to experiment, but the biggest challenge comes is to scale and adapting those innovation at a large scale. That is where the real challenge. So when you all thinking about a great idea, there is always somebody else thinking alike. It could be within your own organization, it could be outside, it could be industry, it could be elsewhere, right? The ability to reach out, to connect with them, and bringing that partnership. And when you have more than one voice saying that this is a great idea, that's where you show the power of taking that innovation to the next level. And that's where the innovation committee can help. And this is why if you are available, if you are a federal employee, civilian employee, come join us. We meet once a month to have this great conversation internally within the government. And this is a great opportunity to build that network. So, thank you.
Everyone, I very much enjoyed our conversation. Unfortunately, we're out of time for this session of the 2024 Cloud Exchange. So let me first thank my guests. Ann Duncan is the Chief Information Officer at the Energy Department. Ches Sivagananam is the Chief Architect for the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation. And David Larimore is the Chief Technology Officer at the Homeland Security Department. Everyone, thank you so much for taking the time. I'm Jason Miller, and you're watching Federal News Network. Now let me send you back to the studio for more from the Cloud Exchange.